Hi, I'm Donovan Force, and I have a problem with understanding. Now, Merriam-Webster defines understanding in three ways. The first is mutual understanding, and mutual understanding is simply a mutual agreement between two or more parties where everybody understands the agreement. And this is what is called mutual agreement, mutual understanding, and I don't have a problem with that kind of understanding. The second is sympathetic understanding. This is being empathetic or putting yourself in someone else's shoes to understand what they're going through. And I know as much as anybody else how hard, that life is hard. And I'm very thankful that my God, my Savior, knows and has been through the same kind of betrayal, the same kind of rejection, the same kind of ridicule that I've been through. And I'm so thankful that He understands this kind of thing. And I definitely don't have a problem with this kind of understanding. But what I do have a problem with is the third one, and that's what they call mental grasp slash comprehension. And basically, as my ex-wife said, you just don't get the big picture. And if you had a couple thousand exclamation points after that, you'll get the sentiment. But she's absolutely right. I don't get it. I don't get a lot of things. I don't understand a lot of things. And this is really hard for someone like me who's aspiring to be a pastor. And well, in our course here, we learn it's called Understanding Human Communication. It should be rather called Understanding How to Speak to Humans, how to communicate to humans, because it teaches us how to speak so others can comprehend what we're saying. But it doesn't really teach us to understand human communication, which I was really hoping for. And that is the learning to speak is very important for an up and coming pastor. But so is learning to understand what others need. I need to know what my future parishioners need from me. And so that's a big issue for me. And so that was the goal of my research for this speech, was to find what would help me to better understand others. So the first thing you should understand is what we call TBI. Now you go online and you look up TBI, you're gonna find all sorts of different meanings for these three letters. But if you look up something like memory, TBI, or understanding, TBI, or anything like cognitive function, TBI, you're going to come up with the type of TBI that I'm talking about. And it stands for traumatic brain injury, which simply refers to anybody who's had trauma on the brain. Now for myself, I had brain cancer. And it essentially swelled to the size that it was causing swelling in my cavity in my skull, where my brain was getting pushed up against it, and it was causing a lot of pain. And this is the first trauma that my brain had to go through. The second trauma would be when I went in for brain surgery, and they had to go in and go through the brain and get to the area that they needed to be, which was dead center here and dead center here. And it was the pituitary gland and hypothalamus gland. And the third trauma that I had to experience was going through radiation. And if you know anything about radiation, is what the nuclear bomb does. And that's essentially what had to happen here. And I had it on my brain and spine. And this was the biggest trauma I experienced to my brain. And this is what changed things. So I went online, and I'm going to look at this. This place was called Model Systems Knowledge Translation Center, or MSKTC.org. Now this place is, if you want to go there, is really great for helping you to understand what people who have had trauma to their brain, to help to see what they go through, to see what some of their issues are. And for me, I put a couple down here so this way you could understand. These is problems with processing and understanding information. These are things like taking longer to grasp what others are saying, taking longer to understand and follow direction, and these are also things like taking longer to read and comprehend written information. Now, I have this book up here not really for a prop, but to explain that when I read this book, and I have to read a chapter, I have to go through this chapter 3 or 4 or 5,000 times before I can begin to comprehend it. And that's just how it is for me. And so this is a real thing with someone that has trauma that has had trauma to their brain. We have an issue with reading. And it doesn't matter if it's a really great book, it could be the most exciting book in the world, but we take a million years to go through a chapter and hope to get it. And we've got to do it so often, do it over and over again in hopes to comprehend it. So that's one of the issues that we have. And another one that we did, another section in here is called language and communication problems. And then this refers mainly to things like we have problems starting and following conversations, and like it says, understanding what other people are saying. Another is that we get off topic easily, and I do ask for forgiveness because I do get off topic. That is one of the things I do. And another thing I need to ask forgiveness for, because I did just recently go through surgery on my abdomen, and I still have a little bit of pain, so if you see me hold here on my belly, don't be like, hey, what's he doing? I just want to explain to you why, because I know I'm supposed to have my hands up here doing all this, but this is why. Okay? So, anyway, so aside from getting off topic easily, which I kind of just did, we have problems, expressing thoughts in an organized manner, and this is a big one for the speech, so I really hope it flows well, because putting things in an organized manner is really hard for me. And but the biggest one I'm having an issue with is I have a problem with nonverbal communication, especially as it involves emotions. Now, my wife, I know when she's upset because she clams up and doesn't look at anybody, and that's just, this is her being the cameraman today. So anyway, I can understand that, but otherwise I have a really hard time picking up emotional cues from people if they're just expecting me to grab at that, and it's just really hard for me. And then this website offers some solutions. Again, it was msktc.org. They offer some solutions. I put a couple here, but none of them were really helpful. One of the ones was work with a speech therapist, and I think that's probably a great idea for somebody who's not a student with a family of 4. And by the way, this is my brand new house, and so now I have a new house payment. And so for somebody who doesn't have all that going, and I'm sure that's a great idea, but I don't have the extra $335 a month it takes to go to one of them. And so I didn't think that was a very great idea, unless of course you have the money to do that. The next thing they offered was worse. It says to reread what you've read to better understand it. And as I got through saying, I already do this. I already reread it a trillion times before I can comprehend it. So I already do this, so it wasn't very helpful. Last one was the worst one. It says to take time to process your information. I thought this one was the worst one, because it basically, they're telling me to do what I already do because I have TBI, because people with TBI take longer to process information, as they already stated. But luckily I was able to go online and find better solutions in the section here that I title Solutions to. Here is for my reading problems. I found a place called Reading Rockets, and it's essentially it's a website for teachers of elementary kids, and it teaches them, it gives a few solutions. Most of them are on how others should treat a person with my issue, but I found a couple that helped me for myself, as I don't want to go around telling everybody how to treat me. But one of these for reading comprehension was to make something that I'm reading relevant to me personally. That way I'll be able to understand it better, because I understand me just fine. So this is a standard thing you do with memorization. When we need to memorize something, we make something important to ourselves to make it personalized. So this is, that's my dog tromping along there. So this is a common thing we do with memory, but I'd never considered to do this with understanding. So I'm really excited to try this out. Another one they said is to find books, find other books on the topic. Now, as I had already discussed, I have a problem with books and reading them way too much to hopefully understand them. But it did remind me of something I learned in a previous school I was at. I was at the University of Washington taking a Eastern Asian history course, and I remember that we had this book. I don't have the book right now; it's somewhere downstairs, but I don't have it. But it was a horrible book to read, and I remember the teacher says to me, he comes up and he says, he loved to just point people out. If you raised your hand, he wouldn't answer you. He would point out to the person he thought wasn't paying attention. That's what he did. That was his thing. But anyway, the point is that after we were done reading this book, he came and he pointed me out first thing in class. He says, "Donovan, what did you think about the book?" And I told him the truth. I said, to be honest, I didn't get anything out of it. I said I think it's one of the worst books ever written because it wasn't written for people to understand it. And normally I was embarrassed to say this because I thought this was just pertaining to me and my issue. Luckily, some other people in class were like, yeah, and they understood what I meant. But he says, well, unfortunately, today is final day, and your final is based on this book. So we took the final, and I failed. And the teacher, my teacher, nice guy that he is, had me come to his office and talk to him about it. And I explained my issue, and he was nice enough to let me retake the test, but he said, you got to do something to understand this. And so anyway, after going and trying to find whatever I could to make this better, I ended up looking on YouTube, and I looked for the end of the Qing Dynasty through the period where before the military rule happened, and then I looked for issues of Chiang Kai-shek and Mao, and from communist China to today's communist China. And anyway, I found so much information that I ended up acing the test, and I got a B+ in the class. And it was really great. But this gave me the idea, reminded me that I did that when I read. It says to go find other books on the topic, but instead I was able to go. It reminded me to go and find videos on the subject, and that I think I'm very excited to also work with that. The next site I found was for understanding directions given by someone and requests. And this was from Weebly.com. Again, it is another site for teachers for children, and all of these are. Yet they're very helpful. One thing it says is to make a list of the requests that were given to me. And this again is another thing, another tactic for memorization, is you write down stuff so you don't forget it. And making a list of what things are required of me is a good way for me to relook at it and make sure I understand it. And of course, they also offered audio recordings, but when you're at work, you don't want to have your boss, here boss, can you say that again? But usually bosses are pretty nice if you can say, I need to write that down, can you repeat that? And bosses are pretty nice about that. And so that's an exciting one for me, and I'm really excited to try that. The last one was at PubMed.gov, and this one was for reading nonverbal emotional cues. And they actually had done a study on this site where they had found that our issue wasn't so much that we don't comprehend the nonverbal emotional cues, which we don't, but that that it's not about that. It's about a tonal thing. We unfortunately have to have a verbal cue. We have to hear it. The proof was that they found that we have to have auditory things to understand it. Simply looking at black words on a white page does not help us to understand things, unfortunately, as much as auditory things do. And this is also why the auditory recording would really help. But in conclusion, I know that in conclusion is the fun part, I have a problem with understanding. I have a problem with mental grasp and comprehension. But the exciting thing is that all I have to do is find an auditory way to learn it. Even if I got to read things out loud and do it as slowly as I can, if I can hear it and see it, I can grasp it. And this is the most exciting thing to me, and I'm so excited for this. And I just want to say thank you for Professor, for this assignment, because it has brought hope. And I just wish you a very Merry Christmas. Thank you.